Anyways, let's move on to the Western Conference as we've made our picks. So I picked, to recap, the Penguins, Senators, Rangers, and Bruins.
And I have picked the Islanders, the Senators, the Capitals, and the Bruins. Tweet to Julio15Bonjoli, that's me, and my buddy here, Curtis_Murray, and let us know your Eastern Conference picks. Tell us how many games they're going to win, and just tell us why you think these other teams are going to lose. We're curious. We want to learn this stuff. We're pretty, well, he may not be, but I'm pretty tunnel-minded. But
well, I can see things from both sides why you would pick some of these teams, although the Islanders, to me, is still a curious one. Let's move on to the Western Conference.
Whoa. Says the team that actually beat the Penguins 4-3, but
yeah, in
we'll leave that
here.
right now.
Anyways, let's move on to the Western Conference. We're getting a little over time, but let's move on. The Chicago Blackhawks, the President Trophy winners, taking on the Minnesota Wild, who spent $200 million in acquiring Zach Parise and Ryan Suter in the offseason, which gets them the 8th and final playoff spot in the West. That's a lot of money to pay for that.
It was a lot of money, but I think the money that they paid for, I think it helped them reach that 8th playoff spot.
Yes,
where next year, they might be able to pick a 5th or a 4th kind of thing. Like, they're just slowly kind of building up.
Maybe. Like, they got some good young players. I'm just saying, if you're doing this for a one-year thing, I don't think they are, but if you're doing it for a one-year thing,
it's
really? I have another team that I could pick about it spending a lot of money in the off-season and doing really crappy.
And we're going to talk about that later in the show.
Our picks. Chicago, both of us picked Chicago. I don't think there's much doubt about it. I think Minnesota's still too raw.
Yeah.
I don't like their depth on the fence. I don't like their depth up front. Their goaltending is injury prone right now with Backstrom out.
Yep.
And I think Chicago, too deep, too much experience, too good. Jonathan Toews has been a menace this season. I think he'll continue.
The surprising thing is, too, Chicago is one of the youngest teams in the NHL right now.
Yep.
And they're probably one of the most sophisticated professional teams in the NHL.
They're one of the most complete teams in the NHL, I would say, right now.
You'd think that they'd be the most raw and stuff, and like they just can't handle it. But
yeah, well, when you have Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, Marian Hossa, those are your three core guys. Patrick Sharp you can throw in there as well.
Yeah.
And then you have Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, all of those guys top of the class of their positions.
Yeah.
And they've all won Stanley Cups already.
Yeah.
That says it all right there. Let's move on to the Ducks taking on the Detroit Red Wings. This was a matchup a while back when the Ducks, I believe it was back in 2003 when Detroit just barely made the playoffs, and they were out in the first round thanks to the Ducks, who actually beat them in 4. This was back when they were the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, back in 2003.
And we talked about that in the first episode, if you've been watching, how I don't like the Ducks because they changed their name.
Yeah.
But we'll leave that at that and talk about our picks.
Yes. I am taking the Ducks. I think everybody's counting them out because they're having a tough go of it as of late. They're starting to slide a little bit, but I think the Ducks are going to come back. I think they got, Ryan Getzlaf up front is going to be a menace for them, as well as Corey Perry. Team Mussolini has been just
you can't hate on that guy.
An ageless wonder. 40, I think he's 41, 42.
Yeah.
Just he could still play for another 5 or 6 years, and he'll still be just as dominant as he is today.
Yeah.
I like their defense as well. I think they've really improved in that area. I think that's why they made the playoffs as high as they did this year. But of course, Ryan will disagree with me as he'll take the Detroit Red Wings. Why is that?
Just because they're such an aged team. Like, you can't really, looking at it here, they're probably one of the probably the oldest team in the NHL. Well, not in the NHL, but to have playoff games and have probably the oldest combined age and all that stuff. I just think that Detroit's experience and age and just player
combined,
level, their whole combined experience is going to be able to push them past.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a good series. I believe I took this one 7 games because I think Detroit can get that far. I just think they're going to break down a little bit just because, I think Pavel Datsuk's played a lot of games in the KHL and the NHL.
And with Zetterberg, too.
And
He's
Zetterberg
starting to get
as well.
old, too.
Yeah.
And you
and
never
their
know
defense,
what they're
and their defense,
do.
you still don't know about their defense. Nick Lidstrom is not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They lost Denny DeKaiser to injury, so their defense is looking a little shaky right now, but we'll see. I think it'll be a good series. The San Jose Sharks taking on the lone Western Canadian team, the Vancouver Canucks, who won the Northwest Division. This one, the only reason I picked the Vancouver Canucks is because
it's the only Canadian. Well, only Canadian team in the Western Conference. But that might help.
Yeah, but that wasn't really why I picked them. The reason I picked them is because I'm a big believer in the Sharks are toast. Excuse me while I burp, but I believe the Sharks have been in the same situation since about 8 years ago, where they had a bunch of guys. They were supposed to, they had Team Solani way back in the day. They won the President's Trophy. They were supposed to be the best team in the NHL, go into the playoffs, and they get kicked out in the first or second round. And that's been their MO since the beginning, except for that one year where they got to the conference finals and played the Canucks, and we all know what happened there. But I think that the Sharks, they have some very good players. I think Couture could be a difference maker for them. And Niemi, he has won a cup, so who knows? But I think the Canucks can overcome some of this stuff. I thought going into this postseason that Kessler would be healthy, but apparently he's not.
Yeah. And same with Schneider too. Like, even though he just got injured right at the end, he's a phenomenal goalie. Like, I'd pick him over Luongo any day.
Yeah.
Even though Luongo's a strong, heavy goalie.
Yeah.
It's just Schneider's got that young age where he's got that mobility, movement, flexibility, and he just has that movement to grow, whereas Luongo's reached his peak probably about, 2 years ago after he just about won the playoffs.
Yeah, it's
just about won the Stanley Cup and won the gold medal at the Olympics.
Yeah, this is another topic for another day, but I think Luongo's actually proven himself quite. He can play in this league, and he can play at a high level in this league. But I think he just gets a lot of slack for a couple of bad goals he gave up, and I harp on him too just because I'm an Oilers fan, so I can do that with the Canucks. But you're going to take the San Jose Sharks in this one. Why is that?
I just think Joe Thornton is going to be even though Joe Thornton, Logan Couture, and all these other Joe Thornton's not a young guy, but I think with Joe Thornton's experience and age in this series, I think that's going to be able to push them that much further. Even though Vancouver has the Sedin brothers, and they have a ton of playoff games, a ton of regular season games, and just a ton of experience between the two of them. I think it's going to be Joe Thornton kind of being the not lone wolf, but he's going to be the leader of the pack kind of thing, and just being able to push his team through this round.
Yeah, it could be. Joe Thornton, everybody starts stomping on him because he hasn't had too much playoff success. He has had a little bit of success. Obviously, he has not been to the big dance, so you can always say that could be his downfall to a Hall of Fame career. The St. Louis Blues, the final matchup, will be taking on the Los Angeles Kings. And remember, we did make these picks before the playoffs started, so I picked the LA Kings. And this is definitely not working out. The reason I picked them is, I thought, you look at their team, they're basically the same. The only difference is Matt Green and I believe it's William Mitchell are hurt.
Yeah.
And now they brought in Robbie Regier, a former Flame, which I should have been more on the ball for the first time I looked at him. You bring in a former Flame, and he's not going to do anything. But then again, St. Louis Blues brought in Jay Bouwmeester, and he is actually paying dividends for them, and that's why you picked them.
Kind of, sort of. I never really actually put much thought into it.
I just tried to tie the whole thing together.
Well,
you see, it's called transition. That's what it's.
It works well when you transition it, but even though it's nice to have those Canadian not necessarily Canadian players, but it's from Calgary and stuff like that. Those players paying off for you, it'll really pay off in the end. But I just picked St. Louis because it's been a while since they've been in the playoffs, and I just think they're going to be here to surprise everyone and just open theirs and be like, St. Louis actually as a team. Like,
yeah.
what are we gonna do, right?
Yeah. Well, like they had a great season last year, and I believe they finished second. They finished first in the Central, and I think they just got ousted by the Kings.
Yeah.
And that's why the only reason I picked them was I thought the Kings had their number, and I thought Jonathan Quick would be able to bounce back, and I thought he's actually played really well. He just let in a crappy goal in Game 1, and Game 2 he let in a crappy goal as well.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. So to recap the West, I picked Chicago, Anaheim, Vancouver, and Los Angeles. And we're alright, so we're still trying to get our timing down, and hopefully we'll figure out a way to
get bigger memory cards so this doesn't happen as often.
Yeah, hopefully, or we can do. We'll figure out something to process. But let's recap what we did in the Western Conference. I picked the Blackhawks, the Ducks, the Canucks, and the Kings.
And I picked the Blackhawks, the Detroit Red Wings, San Jose Sharks, and St. Louis Blues. A lot of my picks have been just not really underdogs, but just teams you wouldn't normally expect to see go far, and I'm hoping they do.
Yeah.
So we are going to go straight to the final game, where it lands, the Game 7 overtime, where it is all or nothing. Who do you pick?
For the Stanley Cup champions this year, I'm taking the New York Rangers, which sounds like a really long shot. They're ranked number 6 in the Eastern Conference heading into the playoffs. I just think Henrik Lundqvist is going to get on a roll. He's going to steal him a series or two. I think Ryan Callahan and Rick Nash finally get it together. Derek Stepan has been doing very well. I like their defense. I like Dan Girardi. I like Matthew Del Zotto. It's not Matthew, it's Michael Del Zotto. And I like Ryan McDonough. I like their defense. If Mark Stoll somehow comes back in the series, that'll be a huge boost for them.
Yeah.
As much as I'm not a huge Tortorella fan, I think he can maybe get them over the bar. But it is a long shot because the Rangers do have a lot of talent, and you expect them to do better.
Yeah.
They just haven't been able to do that under Tortorella, and maybe he's the problem.
You never know if he's the problem or not. Even though, I don't hate him as a coach, but I hate him in his after-the-game interviews and just the attitude he has towards
If he wins, he'll talk forever. If he loses, he'll talk for 5 seconds, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I understand you're frustrated after a loss. You still have a job to do, and I understand that you have your commitments, but if you could do it maybe more consistently, I wouldn't have a problem with it. If you could say, you know what, I'm going to give you as little as I possibly can every single night, that's fine. You give me as much as you can every single night, that's fine. But don't give me this, happy-go-lucky stuff when you win and ho-hum, and you're not going to say anything about humbug when you lose.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I have why I don't like Tortorella that much. St. Louis Blues you have in the winning it all.
I do. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I think it's just because they haven't really seen a Stanley Cup in quite a few years.
To be fair, they haven't been to a Cup final. That's actually a long time. I don't even know when.
It's probably older than both of us.
Well, I know they haven't been to a Cup final, or the first time they went to a Cup final was their expansion year in, I have no idea. But it was their expansion year, I believe it was in the early 70s. Their very first year in the league, they made it to the Cup final. And I actually don't know if they've been back since.
They've made the playoffs and everything.
Oh, absolutely, but not the Cup final.
Yeah.
But for an expansion team to not only make the playoffs, but to make the Stanley Cup final, that's pretty impressive. Even back in the day, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
And so if they win the Cup, it'll be their first Cup ever.
Yep. Did you say who the Rangers were going to be playing in the Stanley Cup final?
Oh, the team that I had them picking or to win in the Cup final against was the Chicago Blackhawks. They have a lot of depth. They have a lot of that stuff. The reason I think they're going to beat the Blackhawks, I think, is just part of it will be goaltending. I think Corey Crawford still isn't going to be good enough for the Blackhawks to get to the promised land.
Yeah.
They still have a bunch of questions. They still have a few question marks on the defensive front. They're deeper than they were last year, but that could be an issue for them. What about you? What about who are the Blues going to take?
Even though nobody's going to see this coming, but I'm going to say St. Louis is going to be playing the New York Islanders. I can't really say much else other than look at tonight's game where they actually came on top of the Penguins. Like, you wouldn't expect it for the strong team the Penguins have.
Mm-hmm.
But they somehow pulled off. Oh, and was it? I don't even think it was in overtime, was it?
Nope, it was straight up in third period, a late goal.
Yeah.
You know, Islanders do have a lot of very skilled forwards. Matt Molson, John Tavares, I should say. Kyle Polzo has been an underrated player. They have some good depth guys. Their defensive core is good. It's got some issues on the defensive side of things, but certainly offensively it is very good. But, you know, is it out of the realm they'll make the Stanley Cup final? Absolutely. But I think you know, there is a slim possibility. And
yeah.
You know what, if they get by the Penguins, who knows?
Yeah.
That's a big question. If they can get by the Penguins and get by anybody. So
yeah.
Who knows? That could be an interesting matchup.